Captain Maya Rodriguez stepped into the operations center as red lights bathed the room in urgency. The convoy designation Bravo 7 flashed on multiple screens, their position marked deep in hostile territory, with enemy contacts closing from 3 directions. General Harrison stood at the central display, his weathered face tight with concentration. Staff Sergeant Morris hunched over communication equipment, relaying desperate calls from the trapped convoy. The air crackled with tension as officers moved between stations, coordinating rescue attempts that kept falling short. Rodriguez approached the general's position, her flight suit still bearing dust from the previous mission. Have you ever walked into a room where everyone expected you to fail before you even spoke? That's exactly what happened next. Where are you watching from today as we dive into this incredible story? I need permission to attempt a sideways landing on the convoy's position, Rodriguez said, her voice cutting through the operational chatter. General Harrison turned, his eyebrows rising in what could only be described as disbelief. Captain Rodriguez, he said, his tone carrying the patience reserved for explaining obvious facts to children. Apache helicopters do not land sideways. They land according to established protocols that have kept pilots alive for decades. The operations team had gone quiet, keyboards stopping their constant clicking as ears tuned to the conversation. Major Chun glanced up from his tactical display. Staff Sergeant Morris adjusted his headset, clearly listening while pretending to focus on radio traffic. Sir, the terrain makes conventional landing impossible, Rodriguez continued. The convoy is pinned in a narrow valley with walls too steep for standard approach. Enemy fire has the area locked down from elevated positions. A sideways approach would give us the angle needed to extract the wounded while maintaining rotor clearance. General Harrison's laugh held no humor. Captain, I've been coordinating helicopter operations since before you learned to fly. What you're describing isn't tactics, it's a circus act. He gestured toward the display, showing the convoy's dire situation. These soldiers need real rescue, not showboating. Rodriguez felt the familiar weight of doubt settling over the room like heavy smoke. She'd encountered this resistance before, this assumption that unconventional meant reckless. Major Chun crossed his arms, his expression mirroring the general's skepticism. Staff Sergeant Morris shook his head slightly, the gesture small but unmistakable. The general continued, his voice gaining authority with each word. Standard operating procedures exist for a reason, Captain. They represent the accumulated wisdom of thousands of combat hours. I will not authorize experimental maneuvers when lives hang in the balance. Around the operations center, other personnel had begun to take notice. Lieutenant Park paused her analysis of enemy positions. Sergeant Wilson looked up from his equipment status board. The doubt wasn't subtle anymore. It filled the space between conversations, lived in the exchanged glances, and shaped the careful way people positioned themselves to watch without appearing to stare. Sir, Rodriguez pressed, her voice steady despite the wall of skepticism facing her. I've executed similar maneuvers in training scenarios. The physics work if you account for rotor, wash dynamics, and approach vector calculations. Training scenarios, General Harrison repeated, emphasizing each syllable. Captain, this isn't a flight simulator. This is life and death in real combat conditions. He stepped closer, his presence commanding the attention of everyone within earshot. Your job is to follow established procedures, not to improvise aerial stunts that risk both aircraft and crew. The silence that followed carried weight. Major Chin's arms remained crossed. Staff Sergeant Morris had stopped all pretense of monitoring communications. Lieutenant Park's tactical analysis lay forgotten as she watched the confrontation unfold. Rodriguez could feel the doubt radiating from every corner of the room, but something else burned stronger inside her chest. She thought of the voices crackling through the radio, soldiers calling for help while enemy fire closed in around them. Sometimes proving people wrong wasn't about ego. Sometimes it was about saving lives. General Harrison turned back to the central display, clearly considering the conversation finished. We'll coordinate a standard extraction once air support clears the hostile positions. That's how professionals handle impossible situations, Captain, through proven methods and established protocols. The dismissal stung more than direct criticism would have. Rodriguez stood there for a moment, surrounded by skeptical faces and the quiet certainty that everyone in the room expected her to accept the general's decision and walk away. But acceptance had never been her strongest quality. The radio crackled with another desperate transmission from Bravo 7. Time was running out for those soldiers, and conventional wisdom was about to get them killed. The radio transmission from Bravo 7 cut through the operations center like a blade. This is Bravo 7 actual. We have multiple wounded and running low on ammunition. Enemy contact from all sides. We need immediate extraction or we're not making it out. Rodriguez watched General Harrison's jaw tighten as the reality of the situation pressed against his rigid adherence to protocol. The convoy had been pinned down for 37 minutes, their position deteriorating with each passing moment. Standard air support was still 20 minutes out, coordinating with ground forces that couldn't establish clear lines of advance through the rocky terrain. Major Chun updated the tactical display, marking new enemy positions that had emerged on the ridgelines. Sir, hostile forces have established overlapping fields of fire. Any conventional helicopter approach would face concentrated anti-aircraft fire from elevated positions. Rodriguez studied the terrain data flowing across multiple screens. The valley where Bravo 7 was trapped resembled a narrow canyon, with walls rising sharply on both sides. Traditional landing zones were non-existent, and the enemy had positioned themselves with clear sight lines on any standard approach vector. Staff Sergeant Morris looked up from his communication station. General, Bravo 7 reports they've lost 2 more to sniper fire. Medical evacuation is becoming critical. General Harrison moved between displays, his experience evident in how quickly he processed the tactical information. His skepticism about Rodriguez's proposed sideways landing hadn't wavered, but the deteriorating situation was forcing him to consider alternatives he clearly didn't like. Captain Rodriguez, he said without turning from the central display, explain your sideways approach theory again. This time with specifics. Rodriguez stepped forward, grateful for the opportunity to present her case with actual data rather than general concepts. Sir, the enemy positions are concentrated on the high ground overlooking standard approach corridors. A sideways landing would allow the Apache to approach from an unexpected vector, using the valley walls themselves as cover until the final descent. She moved to the terrain display, pointing to specific coordinates. By approaching perpendicular to the valley axis and rotating the aircraft 90 degrees during descent, we could land parallel to the convoy position while maintaining rotor clearance from the rock walls. The maneuver would present minimal exposure time to enemy fire. Lieutenant Park looked up from her tactical analysis. Ma'am, what about rotor wash effects in such confined space? The downdraft could destabilize the landing zone. Rodriguez had anticipated this question. The confined space actually works in our favor. The valley walls will channel the rotor wash in predictable patterns. I've calculated the ground effect dynamics for similar terrain configurations. Major Chin remained skeptical, his arms still crossed as he studied the proposed approach route. Captain, even if the physics work in theory, the margin for error is essentially zero. One miscalculation, and you're either hitting rock walls or crashing into the convoy you're trying to rescue. That's exactly my concern, General Harrison added. This isn't about whether the maneuver is theoretically possible. It's about risk assessment and the responsibility we have to both our pilots and the soldiers we're trying to save. Rodriguez felt the familiar frustration of being caught between urgent necessity and institutional caution. She understood the general's position, but understanding didn't make it easier to accept when lives were counting down by the minute. The radio crackled again. Bravo 7 actual to base. We've sustained direct hits on our vehicle. Engines smoking, and we're losing mobility. Whatever you're planning, it needs to happen soon. Staff Sergeant Morris turned to face the group. Sir, Standard extraction timeline just extended to 45 minutes. Air support is redirecting around a new surface-to-air threat that emerged northeast of the target area. General Harrison's expression hardened. The calculated risks of conventional rescue were colliding with the brutal reality that conventional rescue might arrive too late. Rodriguez could see the conflict playing out across his weathered features as duty warred with doctrine. "Captain Rodriguez," the general said slowly, "walk me through the entire maneuver sequence. Every phase from approach to extraction." Rodriguez moved to the display controls, calling up a three-dimensional representation of the valley terrain. Phase 1 involves approaching from the southeast, using the ridgeline to mask our approach until the final 2 kilometers. Phase 2 requires a 90-degree rotation during descent, bringing the aircraft perpendicular to the valley floor. She traced the flight path with precise movements. Phase 3 is the critical landing phase, where we settle parallel to the convoy position while maintaining 6 feet of rotor clearance from the eastern wall. Ground time will be minimal, just long enough to load casualties. Major Chun studied the projected flight path. The enemy positions would have limited engagement time if you execute the rotation correctly. But Captain, this assumes perfect weather conditions and aircraft performance. Any deviation could be catastrophic. Rodriguez nodded. "Sir, I understand the risks. But the alternative is watching Bravo 7 get overrun while we wait for a conventional solution that may arrive too late." The operations center fell quiet except for the steady hum of electronics and the occasional radio transmission. General Harrison stood motionless, weighing decades of military experience against the desperate voices calling for help through the static. Lieutenant Park broke the silence. "General, Bravo 7 just reported enemy forces advancing on their position. They estimate 15 minutes before they're overrun." Rodriguez watched the general's face, seeing the moment when impossible choices crystallized into necessary action. The doubt that had filled the room remained, but it was beginning to compete with something more urgent than skepticism. General Harrison turned to face her directly. "Captain Rodriguez, if I authorize this maneuver and it fails, both you and Bravo 7 are lost. If I don't authorize it, Bravo 7 dies anyway." His voice carried the weight of command decisions that kept officers awake long after the missions ended. The silence stretched between them, filled with calculations that went far beyond flight dynamics and tactical considerations. Sometimes leadership meant choosing between terrible options and hoping experience would guide you toward the least terrible outcome. Rodriguez met his gaze steadily. "Sir, I can execute this maneuver successfully. I wouldn't propose it if I wasn't certain." The radio transmission that followed would change everything about how the next 30 minutes unfolded. The transmission from Bravo 7 carried a new urgency that cut through any remaining debate. "This is Bravo 7 actual. We have movement on all flanks. Estimate hostile forces will reach our position in 12 minutes. We need immediate extraction or we're done." General Harrison's hesitation evaporated like morning mist. "Captain Rodriguez, you have authorization for your unconventional approach. God help us all." Rodriguez felt adrenaline surge through her system as she moved toward the exit. "Thank you, sir. I'll have my crew prepped and airborne in 4 minutes." She pushed through the operations center doors and into the bright desert sunlight. The flight line stretched before her, Apache helicopters arranged in precise rows like sleeping predators waiting to hunt. Her aircraft, tail number 77, sat in the 3rd position with ground crew already conducting pre-flight inspections. Chief Warrant Officer Danny Martinez looked up from the engine compartment as Rodriguez approached at a run. "Skipper, heard you got clearance for something special. What's the mission profile?" "Combat extraction with unconventional landing approach," Rodriguez replied, pulling on her flight helmet. "We're going sideways into a hot landing zone to pull out Bravo 7. You ready for some creative flying?" Martinez grinned as he slammed the engine cowling shut. "Born ready, ma'am. Crew chiefs already loading extra medical supplies and ammunition." We heard the radio chatter. Rodriguez climbed into the pilot's seat, her hands moving through startup procedures with practiced efficiency. Engine ignition sequences, hydraulic pressure checks, weapon systems status, navigation alignment. Each step brought the Apache closer to life, transforming it from static machine to dynamic weapon system. Staff Sergeant Rebecca Torres strapped herself into the gunner's position below and forward of Rodriguez's seat. Flight controls and weapons systems showed green across all displays. Martinez secured himself in the crew compartment, medical equipment arranged for rapid casualty loading. Apache 7-7 into tower, Rodriguez called over the radio, requesting immediate departure clearance for emergency extraction mission. 7-7 in, you are cleared for takeoff. Winds light and variable, visibility unlimited. Good luck out there. Rodriguez brought the engines to full power, feeling the familiar vibration as rotor blades bit into the desert air. The Apache lifted smoothly from the flight line, nose dropping slightly as she transitioned into forward flight. Below them, the airfield fell away, replaced by endless stretches of sand and rock. The flight to Bravo 7's position would take 18 minutes at maximum speed. Rodriguez pushed the Apache hard, watching airspeed indicators climb toward redline values. Every second counted now, with hostile forces closing on the trapped convoy. Torres monitored enemy communications from her gunner's position. "Skipper, I'm picking up increased radio traffic from hostile forces. They know something's coming, and they're coordinating to intercept any rescue attempt." Rodriguez adjusted their approach vector, following ridgelines that would mask their radar signature until the final approach. The terrain below shifted from flat desert to increasingly rugged landscape, with rocky outcroppings and narrow valleys cutting deep scars across the earth. Martinez checked his medical equipment one final time. "Skipper, what's our expected casualty load?" Bravo 7 reported multiple wounded, but didn't specify numbers or severity. "Unknown at this time," Rodriguez replied. "We'll load what we can carry and make multiple trips if necessary. The priority is getting the most critically wounded out first." The radio crackled with another transmission from the operations center. "Apache 7-7 in. This is base operations. Updated intelligence shows enemy anti-aircraft positions on the ridgelines overlooking target area. Be advised, standard approach vectors are heavily defended. Copy, base operations. We're not using standard approach vectors." Rodriguez could imagine General Harrison in the operations center, probably second-guessing his decision to authorize the mission. The doubt that had filled that room was likely growing stronger with each passing minute, fed by the natural tendency to assume that unconventional meant impossible. Ahead of them, the terrain grew more challenging. Rocky walls rose hundreds of feet into the air, creating the narrow valley system where Bravo 7 was trapped. Rodriguez began her initial descent, dropping the Apache lower to use the landscape as cover from enemy observation. Torres updated her tactical display with enemy positions identified through electronic surveillance. "Skipper, I count at least 6 hostile positions on the high ground. They've got overlapping fields of fire covering any standard landing zone." Rodriguez studied the terrain ahead, visualizing the sideways approach that would either save Bravo 7 or kill them all. The valley walls rose steep and forbidding, exactly as the intelligence reports had indicated. A conventional landing was clearly impossible. Martinez secured loose equipment in the crew compartment. "Ma'am, whatever you're planning to do, we're ready back here. Medical equipment is locked down and ammunition is staged for rapid deployment." The Apache thundered through a narrow canyon, rotor wash echoing off stone walls as Rodriguez followed the prescribed approach route. Each mile brought them closer to the moment when theory would either prove itself or fail catastrophically. Rodriguez keyed her radio for a final communication with Bravo 7. "Bravo 7 actual. This is Apache 7-7 and inbound for extraction. Prepare casualties for immediate loading. We'll be on the ground for less than 2 minutes." The response came back immediately, filled with desperate relief. "Apache 7-7 in. We have 4 critical casualties ready for transport. Enemy forces are within visual range and closing fast. Whatever you're going to do it now. Rodriguez could see the valley opening ahead, exactly as the terrain maps had shown. The moment of truth was approaching, when unconventional tactics would either prove General Harrison wrong or justify every doubt he'd expressed. Torres powered up the weapon systems. "Skipper, I have target locks on multiple enemy positions, ready to provide covering fire during the extraction." Rodriguez felt the familiar calm that came before impossible maneuvers. Everything was ready. The aircraft was performing perfectly, the crew was prepared, and the trapped soldiers were counting on her ability to make the impossible look routine. The sideways landing was about to begin. The valley opened before them like a wound in the earth, narrow walls rising hundreds of feet on both sides. Rodriguez could see the trapped convoy immediately, for vehicles clustered in defensive positions with smoke rising from the lead truck. Muzzle flashes sparked from enemy positions on the ridgelines above, creating a deadly crossfire that made conventional rescue impossible. Bravo 7 actual, this is Apache 77 in beginning approach, Rodriguez transmitted. Pop smoke to mark your position and prepare for immediate extraction. Yellow smoke billowed from the convoy's location, confirming their exact coordinates. Rodriguez could see figures moving between the vehicles, soldiers dragging wounded comrades toward what would become the improvised landing zone. Torres locked onto enemy positions with the targeting system. "Skipper, I count 8 hostiles on the eastern ridge and at least 6 more on the western side. They're repositioning to engage our approach." Rodriguez began the complex maneuver that would either save Bravo 7 or prove General Harrison's skepticism justified. She brought the Apache into a steep descent toward the valley mouth, using the rocky walls to mask their approach until the final moments. The radio crackled with transmissions from the operations center. "Apache 77 in. This is base operations. We're monitoring your approach on satellite feed. General Harrison requests confirmation of your landing strategy." Rodriguez could imagine the scene in the operations center. Multiple screens showing her Apache descending toward what appeared to be certain destruction. Every person in that room was probably wondering if they were about to witness a catastrophic failure of judgment. "Base operations beginning sideways approach now," she transmitted, rotating aircraft to perpendicular landing configuration. Rodriguez initiated the 90-degree rotation that would align the Apache parallel to the valley floor instead of perpendicular to it. The maneuver required precise timing and absolute control, with margin for error measured in inches rather than feet. Torres felt the aircraft shift beneath her as Rodriguez executed the rotation. The sensation was unlike anything in standard flight training, a deliberate defiance of conventional helicopter operations that demanded complete trust in pilot skill. Enemy fire intensified as hostile forces realized the Apache was committing to an actual landing rather than a simple strafing run. Tracer rounds streaked past the cockpit as Rodriguez continued the descent, the valley walls growing larger with each passing second. Martinez monitored the crew compartment systems while preparing for rapid casualty loading. "Skipper, medical equipment is secure and ready. How long will we have on the ground?" "Less than 90 seconds, Rodriguez replied, her voice steady despite the complexity of the maneuver unfolding around them. "We load fast and get out before enemy forces can concentrate fire." The Apache continued its sideways descent, rotor blades spinning dangerously close to the eastern wall of the valley. Rodriguez made constant adjustments to maintain precise clearance while accounting for wind effects and the unpredictable air currents created by the confined space. Torres engaged enemy positions with suppressing fire, the Apache's weapon systems sending 30mm rounds into hostile positions on both ridgelines. The covering fire was essential to protect the exposed convoy during the extraction process. Bravo 7 actual reported their status over the radio. "Apache 77 in. We have casualties positioned for loading. Enemy forces are advancing down the western slope toward our position. Estimate 3 minutes before they reach us." Rodriguez acknowledged the transmission while fighting to maintain control during the most critical phase of the landing. The Apache was now fully sideways relative to the valley axis, its unusual orientation creating aerodynamic challenges that required constant correction. The operations center maintained radio contact throughout the maneuver. Apache 77 and satellite imagery shows your current position. Confirm you're maintaining rotor clearance from valley walls. Affirmative. Base operations. Clearance is minimal but adequate. Continuing descent to landing zone. Rodriguez could see the convoy soldiers clearly now, their faces turned upward as they watched the Apache execute a maneuver that should have been impossible. Some were dragging wounded comrades toward the improvised landing zone, while others maintained defensive positions against advancing enemy forces. Torres continued engaging hostile targets while monitoring the landing approach. Skipper, enemy fire is concentrated but not accurate. The sideways orientation is throwing off their targeting calculations. Rodriguez felt a grim satisfaction at that observation. The unconventional approach was working exactly as she'd predicted, presenting enemy forces with targeting problems they hadn't anticipated. Standard anti-aircraft tactics assumed conventional flight profiles. The Apache settled toward the valley floor, its sideways orientation allowing Rodriguez to maintain rotor clearance while positioning the aircraft for rapid casualty loading. The ground effect created by rotor wash in the confined space was manageable, confirming her calculations about air current dynamics. Martinez prepared to deploy as soon as the Apache touched down. Medical equipment was staged for immediate use, and ammunition was ready for distribution to the convoy if needed. Every second on the ground would count. Rodriguez keyed her radio for final approach coordination. Bravo 7 actual. We're touching down in 30 seconds. Have your casualties ready for immediate loading. We'll provide covering fire during extraction. The convoy soldiers moved with desperate efficiency, carrying wounded comrades toward the Apache's landing position. Enemy fire continued from the ridgelines, but the sideways approach had disrupted their planned defensive positions. Torres maintained weapons engagement throughout the landing sequence. Multiple hostile positions were suppressed or eliminated, creating a window of opportunity for the extraction to succeed. The Apache's landing gear contacted the valley floor with a solid thump, the aircraft settling into position parallel to the convoy's defensive perimeter. Rodriguez had successfully executed the impossible sideways landing that General Harrison had dismissed as circus showboating. Now came the critical test of whether the maneuver could save lives under actual combat conditions. The next 90 seconds would determine if unconventional tactics could succeed where traditional approaches had failed. Enemy forces were advancing down the valley walls, and time was running out for everyone involved. The Apache's rotors continued spinning as Rodriguez maintained power settings for immediate departure. Through her cockpit, she could see Bravo 7 soldiers running toward the aircraft, for wounded men being carried between them, while others provided covering fire against advancing enemy forces. Sergeant First Class Williams reached the Apache first, helping to guide a stretcher carrying a soldier with severe leg wounds. Martinez jumped from the crew compartment, his medic training taking over as he assessed casualties and directed their placement inside the aircraft. "We've got a sucking chest wound here," Martinez called out over the rotor noise. "This one needs immediate hospital care. 2 others have shrapnel wounds, manageable, but they need surgical attention." Rodriguez monitored engine parameters while keeping the Apache in position. The sideways landing had worked perfectly, but maintaining stability in the confined space required constant attention to collective and cyclic inputs. Wind patterns created by the valley walls were creating unpredictable lift variations. Torres continued engaging enemy positions from her gunner station. "Skipper, hostiles on the western ridge are moving to new firing positions. They're trying to get angle shots on our position." Staff Sergeant Jackson from Bravo 7 approached the pilot's side of the aircraft. "Ma'am, we've got intel that enemy reinforcements are moving through the northern approach." They'll have us surrounded in about 4 minutes. Rodriguez acknowledged the information while calculating departure timing. All casualties needed to be loaded and secured before she could begin the equally challenging takeoff sequence. The sideways landing was only half the battle. Martinez worked efficiently to secure wounded soldiers inside the crew compartment. The Apache wasn't designed for medical evacuation, but emergency modifications allowed for stretcher placement and basic life support equipment. Space was cramped but adequate for the 4 casualties. The radio crackled with updates from the operations center. Apache 77 this is base operations. Satellite imagery shows enemy forces converging on your position from multiple directions. What's your departure timeline? Base operations. We're loading final casualties now. Departure in 60 seconds. Rodriguez transmitted while maintaining aircraft stability in the turbulent air currents. Torres engaged new targets as enemy forces attempted to establish firing positions with clear sight lines to the Apache. The weapon systems performed flawlessly, sending accurate fire toward hostile positions while avoiding damage to the aircraft's critical systems. Sergeant Williams helped Martinez secure the last wounded soldier inside the crew compartment. Ma'am, that's all our casualties loaded. We've also got 3 walking wounded who can fight but need medical attention back at base. Rodriguez made rapid calculations about weight distribution and aircraft performance. The additional personnel would push the Apache near maximum load capacity, but the alternative was leaving wounded soldiers to face capture or death. Load them up, she decided. We'll manage the weight on departure. The 3 walking wounded climbed into available positions in the crew compartment, their weapons ready to provide additional firepower during the extraction flight. Martinez distributed ammunition and coordinated positions to maintain aircraft balance. Torres reported increasing enemy activity from her gunner's position. Skipper, I'm seeing movement on both ridge lines. They're coordinating for a concentrated attack on our departure route. Rodriguez began pre-departure engine adjustments, bringing power settings to levels needed for a heavyweight takeoff from the confined landing zone. The sideways departure would be even more challenging than the landing, requiring precise control inputs while under enemy fire. The operations center maintained contact throughout the loading process. Apache 77 General Harrison requests confirmation that your departure route will avoid enemy anti-aircraft positions. Rodriguez could imagine General Harrison watching satellite feeds of the extraction, probably still doubting whether the unconventional approach could succeed completely. The landing had worked, but successful departure would be the final proof of concept. Base operations, departing via southeastern vector to minimize exposure time. Beginning takeoff sequence now. Martinez reported from the crew compartment that all personnel were secured and ready for departure. Medical equipment was functioning properly, and the most critically wounded soldier was stable for transport to surgical facilities. Torres continued suppressing enemy positions while preparing for the transition from ground support to aerial combat. The weapons systems would need to provide covering fire throughout the departure sequence to protect the overloaded Apache. Rodriguez increased collective input, feeling the Apache's response as it lifted from the valley floor. The sideways takeoff required the same precision as landing, with added complexity for maximum weight loading and enemy fire. Enemy tracers streaked past the cockpit as hostile forces concentrated fire on the departing aircraft. Rodriguez maintained the sideways orientation while gaining altitude, using the valley walls for protection during the most vulnerable phase of flight. The Apache climbed steadily, its unconventional departure confusing enemy gunners who had positioned themselves to engage conventional flight patterns. Rodriguez felt satisfaction as the maneuver succeeded exactly as planned. Sergeant Williams provided updates on enemy positions from his vantage point in the crew compartment. Ma'am, hostile forces are realizing we're actually getting away. They're repositioning but can't get effective angles on our flight path. Torres engaged targets of opportunity while monitoring the Apache's climb performance. The overloaded aircraft was responding well, confirming that weight calculations had been accurate despite the challenging conditions. Martinez worked to stabilize the most critically wounded soldier during the climb. His medical training was essential for keeping casualties alive during transport to definitive care facilities. The operations center tracked their progress on satellite imagery. Apache 77, you are clear of immediate enemy fire. Confirm your route to medical facilities. Rodriguez set course for the forward surgical hospital, knowing that rapid medical attention could make the difference between life and death for several of the wounded soldiers. The sideways landing and departure had succeeded, but the mission wouldn't be complete until casualties reached appropriate care. The impossible maneuver was working exactly as she had calculated, proving that unconventional approaches could succeed when traditional methods failed. General Harrison's skepticism was about to be thoroughly disproven by successful execution of tactics he had dismissed as showboating. Torres maintained watch for additional threats while the Apache carried its precious cargo towards safety. The extraction was succeeding beyond what anyone in the operations center had thought possible. The Apache cleared the valley walls with wounded soldiers secured in the crew compartment, but Rodriguez knew the mission was far from over. Enemy forces throughout the region had monitored the extraction, and hostile units were repositioning to intercept the medical evacuation flight. Torres scanned her displays for new threats. "Skipper, I'm picking up radio chatter about surface-to-air missile sites activating along our route to the forward surgical hospital. They're coordinating to bring us down during transit." Rodriguez adjusted her flight path to avoid known hostile positions while maintaining maximum speed toward medical facilities. The Apache's engines were performing at peak efficiency despite the heavy load, but enemy forces had time to organize a reception committee. Martinez monitored the wounded soldiers throughout the flight. The soldier with chest wounds was stable, but needed surgical intervention within the next 20 minutes. 2 others required blood transfusions that could only be provided at the hospital facility. Staff Sergeant Jackson provided tactical updates from his position in the crew compartment. "Ma'am, my unit's radio operator is tracking enemy movements. They've got mobile anti-aircraft units moving to blocking positions along the main approach routes." Rodriguez processed this information while calculating alternative routes to the medical facility. Flying direct would expose them to concentrated enemy fire, but indirect routes might cost precious time that wounded soldiers couldn't afford. The operations center maintained contact throughout the transit flight. Apache 77, this is base operations. Intelligence reports indicate enemy forces are attempting to establish an ambush along your planned route. General Harrison's voice came over the radio personally. "Captain Rodriguez, you've successfully completed the extraction phase. Don't risk those lives by taking unnecessary chances during transit." Rodriguez appreciated the general's concern, but his suggestion revealed continued misunderstanding of the tactical situation. Avoiding all risks would mean accepting longer flight times that could prove fatal to critically wounded soldiers. Base operations, enemy positions are known and manageable. Maintaining direct route to provide fastest medical care for casualties. Torres prepared countermeasures for potential missile engagement while maintaining surveillance of ground threats. The Apache's defensive systems were functioning properly, ready to deploy if enemy forces achieved target lock. Martinez coordinated with hospital personnel via radio to prepare surgical teams for incoming casualties. Medical facilities needed advance warning to assemble appropriate personnel and equipment for trauma surgery. The landscape below shifted from rocky desert to more populated areas as they approached the forward operating base containing medical facilities. Enemy presence was lighter in this region, but isolated hostile units could still pose threats to aircraft. Sergeant Williams assisted Martinez with medical care during transit. His combat medic training complemented Martinez's aviation medical specialist skills, providing optimal care under challenging conditions. Rodriguez spotted the forward surgical hospital ahead, its landing zone clearly marked and defended by perimeter security forces. Ground personnel were already preparing for immediate casualty reception and transport to surgical facilities. Torres maintained weapons readiness as they approached the landing zone. Enemy forces occasionally attempted attacks on medical facilities, violating international law, but creating ongoing security threats that required constant vigilance. The Apache began its descent toward the hospital landing zone, where medical teams waited with stretchers and emergency equipment. The transition from flight to ground care needed to happen rapidly to minimize exposure time in the open. Martinez briefed the incoming medical team via radio about casualty conditions and treatment provided during flight. This information would help surgical teams prioritize cases and prepare appropriate interventions. Rodriguez settled the Apache onto the designated landing zone with precision that reflected her years of experience in medical evacuation operations. The aircraft's engines remained at flight-ready power settings for immediate departure if threats emerged. Medical personnel swarmed the Apache as soon as it touched down, professionally transferring wounded soldiers from the crew compartment to waiting stretchers. Their movements were coordinated and efficient, reflecting extensive practice in trauma reception. Martinez accompanied the most critically wounded soldier toward the surgical facility, providing continuity of care and detailed medical information to the receiving team. His expertise ensured smooth transition between aviation and hospital medical care. Torres maintained security watch while the Apache remained on the ground, monitoring for any threats that might emerge during the vulnerable period of casualty transfer. The operations center tracked the successful completion of the medical evacuation phase. Apache 77 confirmed casualty transfer complete and ready for departure. Rodriguez confirmed that all wounded soldiers had been successfully transferred to medical care. The sideways landing extraction had accomplished its primary mission of saving lives that would have been lost to conventional rescue attempts. Staff Sergeant Jackson approached the pilot's position before departing. "Ma'am, I want you to know that maneuvers saved my men's lives. We all thought we were done until your Apache showed up sideways in that valley." Rodriguez acknowledged his thanks while preparing for departure back to base. The real test would be the debriefing with General Harrison, where the success of unconventional tactics would need to be evaluated against military doctrine. Torres reported clear skies for the return flight to home base. Enemy forces had apparently focused their attention on other targets, allowing safe transit back to the operations center where the mission had begun. The Apache lifted from the hospital landing zone and turned toward home, carrying the satisfaction of mission accomplished through methods that had initially been dismissed as impossible. Rodriguez knew that General Harrison would have questions about the unconventional approach. Martinez secured medical equipment during the return flight, already preparing reports on casualty care and evacuation procedures. His documentation would become part of the official mission record. The forward surgical hospital fell away behind them as the Apache headed home. For wounded soldiers were receiving life-saving medical care because unconventional tactics had succeeded where traditional approaches would have failed. Rodriguez began mentally preparing for the mission debrief, knowing that success would require explanations about why conventional wisdom had been wrong in this particular situation. The Apache touched down on the home airfield as desert heat shimmered across the tarmac. Rodriguez completed shutdown procedures while ground crew moved to secure the aircraft and begin post-flight inspections. The successful extraction of Bravo 7 would generate extensive documentation and analysis. Chief Warrant Officer Martinez gathered medical equipment and prepared his casualty care report. "Skipper, those soldiers are going to make full recoveries because we got them to surgery in time. The sideways landing saved 4 lives today." Rodriguez climbed from the pilot's seat, feeling the satisfaction that came from proving unconventional tactics could succeed when properly executed. But she also knew that General Harrison would require detailed explanations about every aspect of the mission. Torres secured weapons systems and documented ammunition expenditure during the operation. Her accurate suppressive fire had been essential for protecting the Apache during both landing and departure phases of the extraction. The operations center beckoned across the flight line, where General Harrison and his staff would be waiting for immediate mission debrief. Success in combat was always followed by intensive analysis to determine lessons learned and tactical applications. Rodriguez walked toward the operations building, her flight suit still bearing dust from the desert mission. Around her, normal base operations continued, but she could sense increased attention from personnel who had monitored the unconventional extraction. Lieutenant Park intercepted her approach to the operations center. "Ma'am, General Harrison requests immediate debrief in the main briefing room. He wants complete mission analysis while details are fresh in everyone's memory." Rodriguez nodded, expecting intensive questioning about tactical decisions that had deviated from established procedures. Success would not automatically validate unconventional approaches in the general's evaluation process. The briefing room was filled with personnel who had monitored the mission from beginning to end. Major Chen stood near tactical displays showing satellite imagery of the extraction site. Staff Sergeant Morris had communication logs ready for review. General Harrison entered the room with measured steps, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the assembled personnel. "Captain Rodriguez, please provide complete mission briefing starting with initial approach to target area." Rodriguez moved to the central briefing position, organizing her thoughts for systematic presentation of tactical decisions and execution details. "Sir, initial approach followed planned route using terrain masking to avoid enemy observation until final descent phase." She activated the display system, showing satellite imagery of the valley where Bravo 7 had been trapped. Enemy positions on ridgelines created overlapping fields of fire that made conventional landing impossible under combat conditions. The sideways approach began at 2,000 feet above target elevation. Rodriguez continued. Aircraft rotation to perpendicular orientation occurred during descent to minimize exposure time to enemy fire while maintaining rotor clearance. Major Chen studied the tactical display. "Captain, what were the specific margins for rotor clearance during landing phase?" The satellite imagery suggests extremely confined space for helicopter operations. Rotor clearance maintained 6 feet minimum from Eastern Valley Wall throughout descent and landing phases. Wind effects and ground turbulence were within calculated parameters for safe operation. General Harrison listened without interruption as Rodriguez detailed each phase of the mission. His questions would come after complete briefing, allowing him to identify areas requiring additional explanation or justification. Staff Sergeant Morris provided communication logs showing coordination between the Apache crew and trap convoy personnel. Timeline analysis demonstrated rapid execution of extraction under extreme time pressure. Torres briefed weapons engagement during the mission. "Sir, suppressive fire was effective in neutralizing enemy positions that threatened the extraction. No friendly fire incidents occurred despite complex tactical environment." Martinez presented medical aspects of the mission. "General, all 4 casualties received appropriate care during transport. Rapid evacuation enabled life-saving surgical intervention that would not have been possible with delayed conventional rescue." General Harrison absorbed information from multiple sources while evaluating the overall mission against standard military criteria. Success was obvious, but implications for future tactical doctrine required careful consideration. "Captain Rodriguez," the general said finally, "your unconventional approach achieved complete mission success under circumstances where conventional tactics would have failed. This requires serious evaluation." Rodriguez felt cautious optimism as General Harrison acknowledged the mission success. But military evaluation involved more than simple success or failure. Tactical innovations required integration into broader strategic frameworks. The satellite imagery clearly shows that standard helicopter operations were impossible in that terrain configuration, Major Chen observed. The enemy had established defensive positions specifically designed to defeat conventional rescue attempts. Staff Sergeant Morris added communication analysis. "Sir, timeline comparison shows the sideways landing approach saved approximately 30 minutes compared to alternative extraction methods. Those minutes were critical for casualty survival. Torres provided weapons effectiveness assessment. General, enemy forces were clearly surprised by the unconventional approach. Their defensive positions were optimized against standard flight profiles, not sideways landing techniques. Martinez concluded with medical outcomes. Sir, hospital reports confirm that rapid evacuation was essential for casualty survival. Delayed extraction would have resulted in multiple fatalities from preventable causes. General Harrison studied mission data from multiple perspectives, weighing tactical innovation against established procedures that represented decades of accumulated military experience. Innovation always carried risks alongside potential benefits. Captain Rodriguez, he said slowly, your mission planning identified tactical requirements that conventional procedures could not address. Execution demonstrated that calculated risks can produce successful outcomes. Rodriguez sensed shift in the general's evaluation, from skepticism toward recognition that unconventional approaches might have legitimate applications under specific circumstances. The tactical analysis supports your assessment that enemy positions made conventional landing impossible, General Harrison continued. Your sideways approach exploited vulnerabilities in enemy defensive planning. Major Chen nodded agreement. Sir, the mission demonstrates importance of tactical flexibility when facing adaptive enemy tactics. Rigid adherence to standard procedures can become predictable vulnerability. General Harrison's expression suggested internal debate between traditional military conservatism and recognition that tactical innovation might be necessary for future combat effectiveness. Captain Rodriguez, your mission succeeded because you correctly identified situation requirements and possess skills necessary for unconventional execution. This combination deserves recognition and further evaluation. Rodriguez felt growing confidence that her tactical approach was gaining acceptance rather than merely grudging acknowledgement of lucky success. The briefing room analysis continued as General Harrison studied mission data with the intensity he typically reserved for strategic planning sessions. The success of Rodriguez's unconventional approach was creating ripple effects that extended beyond simple mission accomplishment. Major Chun highlighted tactical implications on the main display. Sir, the sideways landing technique exploited predictable weaknesses in enemy defensive planning. They positioned anti-aircraft assets, assuming conventional flight profiles. Rodriguez provided additional technical details about aircraft performance during the mission. General, the Apache's systems performed within normal parameters throughout the maneuver. No extraordinary stress was placed on mechanical components or flight controls. Staff Sergeant Morris presented communication analysis showing coordination effectiveness between air and ground units. Sir, the extraction timeline demonstrates significant advantages when aircraft operations can adapt to tactical requirements rather than standard procedures. General Harrison listened to multiple perspectives while processing implications that extended beyond the immediate mission. Tactical innovation always created questions about broader military doctrine and training requirements. Lieutenant Park entered the briefing room with updated intelligence reports. General, enemy radio intercepts show significant confusion about the Apache's capabilities. They're requesting guidance for countering sideways landing approaches. This intelligence revelation added strategic significance to the tactical success. Enemy forces were apparently unprepared for unconventional helicopter operations, creating potential advantages for future missions requiring similar flexibility. Torres provided weapons effectiveness analysis during the mission. Sir, suppressive fire was more effective than anticipated because enemy positions were optimized against conventional attack angles. The sideways approach created targeting problems for hostile forces. Martinez presented medical evacuation statistics comparing conventional versus unconventional extraction methods. General, time analysis shows the sideways landing approach reduced casualty evacuation time by 40% compared to standard procedures. General Harrison absorbed information while evaluating military implications that extended beyond single mission success. Innovation in combat required careful balance between tactical advantage and operational risk. Captain Rodriguez, the general said thoughtfully, your approach succeeded because you identified limitations in conventional procedures and possessed skills necessary for alternative execution. This raises questions about training doctrine. Rodriguez sensed opportunity to discuss broader implications of tactical flexibility in modern combat environments. Sir, enemy forces are adapting their tactics to counter our standard procedures. We need corresponding adaptation in our approaches. The conversation was interrupted by urgent communication from hospital personnel. General Harrison, this is Forward Surgical Hospital. All 4 casualties from the Bravo 7 extraction are stable and expected to make full recoveries. This medical update provided final confirmation that the unconventional mission had achieved complete success. Lives were saved that would have been lost to conventional rescue attempts, validating tactical innovation under combat conditions. Major Chen studied satellite imagery of other potential extraction sites in the region. Sir, terrain analysis shows multiple locations where conventional helicopter operations would be impossible, but sideways landing approaches might succeed. Staff Sergeant Morris provided regional intelligence assessment. General, enemy forces throughout the area are establishing defensive positions based on conventional aircraft operations. Unconventional approaches could provide significant tactical advantages. Torres added weapons systems perspective. Sir, the Apache's capabilities are enhanced when tactical flexibility allows optimization of engagement angles and approach vectors. Standard procedures limit operational effectiveness. Martinez concluded with medical considerations. General, rapid evacuation capabilities can be dramatically improved when aircraft operations adapt to tactical requirements rather than predetermined procedures. General Harrison weighed tactical innovation against institutional stability that came from proven procedures. Military effectiveness required balance between reliable methods and adaptive capability. The intelligence reports about enemy confusion suggest tactical advantages that extend beyond single mission applications, Lieutenant Park observed. Unconventional approaches might provide systematic advantages. Rodriguez recognized growing acceptance of her tactical approach among the briefing room personnel. Success was creating momentum for broader evaluation of operational flexibility. Captain Rodriguez, General Harrison said finally, your mission demonstrates that tactical innovation can succeed when properly planned and expertly executed. This requires serious consideration for future operations. The general's acknowledgement represented significant shift from initial skepticism toward recognition that unconventional approaches might have legitimate military applications under appropriate circumstances. Major Chun supported the general's assessment. Sir, mission analysis confirms that tactical flexibility can provide advantages when enemy forces adapt their defensive strategies to counter our standard procedures. Staff Sergeant Morris added operational perspective. General, the Bravo 7 extraction demonstrates capability for mission success under circumstances where conventional approaches would fail completely. Torres provided pilot perspective on aircraft capabilities. Sir, the Apache's performance characteristics support unconventional operations when properly planned and executed by qualified personnel. Martinez concluded with medical outcomes assessment. General, the lives saved during this mission validate tactical innovation when it enables capabilities that standard procedures cannot provide. General Harrison studied mission documentation while considering implications for military training and doctrine development. Innovation required institutional support to translate individual success into systematic capability. Captain Rodriguez, your tactical approach succeeded because you correctly assessed situation requirements and possessed skills necessary for unconventional execution. This combination suggests potential for broader application. Rodriguez felt satisfaction as General Harrison's evaluation shifted from skeptical assessment toward recognition of tactical validity. The proving moment was approaching as institutional resistance yielded to demonstrated success. The mission analysis was building toward conclusions that would either validate unconventional approaches or classify them as exceptional circumstances requiring special authorization for future application. The briefing room atmosphere shifted as General Harrison moved toward the tactical display, showing detailed satellite imagery of the extraction site. His weathered face reflected internal calculations that went beyond simple mission evaluation toward fundamental questions about military doctrine. "Captain Rodriguez," the general said slowly, "your sideways landing approach succeeded where conventional methods would have failed completely. This raises important questions about our tactical training and operational procedures." Rodriguez felt the weight of institutional attention, focusing on implications that extended far beyond single-mission success. Innovation in military operations always created ripple effects that challenged established systems. Major Chin highlighted specific tactical advantages on the display screen. "Sir, enemy radio intercepts confirm they were unprepared for unconventional helicopter operations. Their defensive planning assumed standard flight profiles and approach vectors." Staff Sergeant Morris provided communication analysis showing coordination effectiveness during the mission. "General, ground units reported increased confidence when they realized air support could adapt to tactical requirements rather than predetermined limitations." Lieutenant Park entered with additional intelligence updates. "Sir, regional enemy commanders are requesting guidance for countering sideways landing techniques. Our tactical innovation is creating strategic confusion in hostile forces." This intelligence revelation added significant weight to the tactical discussion. Enemy adaptation suggested that unconventional approaches might provide systematic advantages rather than isolated mission success. Torres presented weapons effectiveness data from her gunner's perspective. "General, suppressive fire was dramatically more effective because enemy positions were optimized against conventional attack angles. The sideways approach created targeting problems they couldn't solve." Martinez concluded medical analysis with outcomes that validated rapid evacuation capabilities. "Sir, hospital reports confirm that unconventional extraction methods can improve casualty survival rates by providing access to previously impossible rescue scenarios." General Harrison absorbed multiple streams of information while weighing tactical innovation against institutional stability. Military effectiveness required balance between proven methods and adaptive capability for changing combat environments. The conversation paused as urgent communication arrived from field commanders requesting clarification about sideways landing authorization procedures. Word of the successful mission was spreading throughout operational units. "Captain Rodriguez," General Harrison continued, "your mission succeeded because you identified tactical requirements that standard procedures could not address. But institutional adoption requires broader evaluation than single-mission success." Rodriguez recognized the critical moment approaching where individual achievement would either translate into systematic change or remain classified as exceptional circumstance requiring special authorization. Major Chin supported broader tactical implications. "Sir, terrain analysis throughout our operational area shows multiple locations where conventional helicopter operations are impossible, but unconventional approaches might succeed." Staff Sergeant Morris added operational perspective from communications monitoring. "General, field commanders are requesting training on unconventional extraction techniques. The tactical community recognizes potential advantages." Torres provided pilot assessment of aircraft capabilities under unconventional operations. "Sir, the Apache's performance characteristics support tactical flexibility when missions require adaptation to specific environmental constraints." Martinez presented medical considerations that validated rapid evacuation through unconventional methods. "General, Casualty survival rates can be dramatically improved when aircraft operations adapt to tactical requirements rather than standard limitations. General Harrison studied mission documentation while considering implications for training doctrine and operational authorization. Innovation required institutional framework to translate individual success into systematic capability. The intelligence about enemy confusion suggests tactical advantages that extend beyond single applications, Lieutenant Park observed. Unconventional approaches might provide persistent strategic benefits. Rodriguez sensed growing momentum toward institutional recognition of tactical flexibility. The proving moment was crystallizing as resistance yielded to demonstrated effectiveness under combat conditions. Captain Rodriguez, General Harrison said thoughtfully, "Your tactical approach demonstrates capabilities that our current training doctrine does not address. This gap between requirement and capability needs correction." The general's acknowledgement represented a fundamental shift from skepticism toward recognition that military effectiveness required adaptation to changing tactical environments. Major Chen highlighted broader implications for operational planning. "Sir, the mission demonstrates that tactical flexibility can provide mission success under circumstances where rigid adherence to standard procedures guarantees failure." Staff Sergeant Morris supported operational perspective with communication effectiveness analysis. General, coordination between air and ground units improved when aircraft operations could adapt to tactical requirements rather than predetermined procedures. Torres added pilot perspective on aircraft performance under unconventional operations. "Sir, the Apache's capabilities are enhanced when tactical flexibility allows optimization of engagement parameters and operational effectiveness." Martinez concluded with medical outcomes that validated lives saved through tactical innovation. "General, rapid evacuation capabilities demonstrate clear advantages when aircraft operations prioritize mission requirements over procedural limitations." General Harrison weighed institutional implications while recognizing tactical success that challenged established military doctrine. Innovation required careful balance between proven effectiveness and systematic implementation. The briefing room discussion was approaching conclusions that would determine whether unconventional approaches gained institutional support or remained exceptional circumstances requiring special authorization procedures. "Captain Rodriguez, your mission analysis demonstrates tactical capabilities that deserve broader evaluation and potential integration into operational doctrine. This requires serious institutional consideration." Rodriguez felt anticipation as General Harrison's evaluation moved toward formal recognition of tactical validity. The proving moment was reaching culmination as individual success translated into institutional acknowledgement. General Harrison stood motionless at the tactical display, his decades of military experience weighing against the undeniable evidence of tactical innovation spread across multiple screens. The silence in the briefing room carried the weight of institutional decision that would either validate unconventional approaches or classify them as dangerous exceptions. "Captain Rodriguez," the general said finally, his voice carrying formal authority that commanded absolute attention from everyone present. "Your sideways landing approach violated every established protocol for helicopter operations in hostile territory." Rodriguez felt her stomach tighten as the general's words seemed to signal institutional rejection despite mission success. Major Chen shifted uncomfortably. Staff Sergeant Morris looked down at his communication logs. And yet, General Harrison continued, turning to face Rodriguez directly. "Your tactical innovation saved 4 lives that would have been lost to conventional rescue attempts. You identified tactical requirements that our standard procedures could not address." The general moved closer to the satellite imagery, showing the impossible terrain where Bravo 7 had been trapped. "Every person in this room monitored your approach, believing it would end in catastrophic failure. Enemy forces positioned themselves, assuming conventional helicopter tactics. Torres watched the general's expression transform as he processed implications that extended beyond single mission evaluation. Lieutenant Park adjusted her intelligence reports, recognizing the significance of the moment. "Your execution was flawless," General Harrison stated with growing conviction. Aircraft performance remained within normal parameters throughout maneuvers that should have been impossible. Rotor clearance was maintained despite confined space that would challenge the most experienced pilots. Martinez documented every word, understanding that this evaluation would become part of official mission records and potentially influence future tactical doctrine. "The enemy radio intercepts confirm they were completely unprepared for your approach," General Harrison continued. "Their defensive positions became liabilities rather than advantages because you exploited assumptions about conventional flight profiles." Major Chin stepped forward. "Sir, the tactical analysis demonstrates systematic advantages when aircraft operations can adapt to environmental requirements rather than predetermined procedures." General Harrison nodded acknowledgement while maintaining focus on Rodriguez. "Captain, your mission planning identified limitations in established doctrine and developed solutions that conventional training does not address." Staff Sergeant Morris provided communication perspective. "General, coordination effectiveness improved dramatically when air support could adapt to tactical requirements. Ground units reported increased confidence in extraction capabilities." The general studied mission timeline data, showing evacuation speed that exceeded conventional capabilities by significant margins. "Time analysis confirms that your unconventional approach provided tactical advantages that standard procedures could not achieve." Torres added weapons effectiveness assessment. "Sir, suppressive fire was more accurate because the sideways approach created engagement angles that enemy forces couldn't counter effectively." Martinez concluded with medical outcomes that validated lives saved through tactical innovation. "General, hospital reports confirm casualty survival rates improved because rapid evacuation was possible under circumstances where conventional methods would have failed." General Harrison absorbed multiple streams of validation while recognizing that individual success required institutional framework for broader application. "Your tactical approach succeeded because you correctly assessed situation requirements and possess skills necessary for innovative execution." Rodriguez sensed the proving moment reaching culmination as institutional resistance yielded to demonstrated effectiveness under combat conditions. "Captain Rodriguez," General Harrison said with formal authority, "your mission demonstrates tactical capabilities that deserve recognition and integration into operational doctrine. This level of innovation under combat pressure represents exceptional military achievement." The general's acknowledgement sent visible relief through the briefing room personnel who had monitored the mission with growing amazement at tactical success. Major Chun supported institutional implications. "Sir, the sideways landing technique provides capabilities for mission success under terrain conditions that make conventional helicopter operations impossible." Staff Sergeant Morris added operational perspective. "General, field commanders are requesting training authorization for unconventional extraction techniques based on demonstrated effectiveness." Lieutenant Park provided strategic intelligence assessment. "Sir, enemy forces throughout the region are adapting their defensive planning to counter our innovative tactical approaches." Torres presented pilot perspective on aircraft performance capabilities. "General, the Apache's systems support tactical flexibility when missions require adaptation to specific environmental constraints." Martinez validated medical advantages through unconventional evacuation methods. "Sir, casualty care can be dramatically improved when aircraft operations prioritize mission requirements over procedural limitations." General Harrison moved to the central briefing position, his expression reflecting formal decision that would establish precedent for future tactical innovation. "Captain Rodriguez, your sideways landing approach will be documented as approved tactical procedure for terrain conditions that prevent conventional helicopter operations. You have proven that calculated innovation can provide mission success where established doctrine fails." Rodriguez felt satisfaction as institutional validation transformed individual achievement into systematic capability for future operational effectiveness. The proving moment was complete. Tactical innovation had overcome institutional skepticism through demonstrated success under combat conditions that demanded adaptation beyond conventional procedures. The transformation in General Harrison's expression was unmistakable as the weight of his formal recognition settled over the briefing room. Major Chun straightened his posture. Staff Sergeant Morris looked up from his communication logs with newfound respect. Lieutenant Park stopped shuffling her intelligence reports. Furthermore, General Harrison continued, his voice carrying the authority of institutional decision. Captain Rodriguez will be assigned to develop training protocols for unconventional helicopter operations. Her tactical innovation represents advancement in our operational capabilities. Rodriguez felt the profound shift from individual achievement to systematic validation. The sideways landing technique was no longer experimental showboating, but approved military doctrine with her name attached to its development. Torres stepped forward with obvious pride in her pilot's accomplishment. Sir, request permission to volunteer for advanced tactical training under Captain Rodriguez's instruction. The weapon's effectiveness demonstrated during this mission exceeded conventional engagement parameters. Martinez joined the support for expanded tactical development. General, medical evacuation capabilities can be dramatically enhanced through unconventional aircraft operations. I recommend incorporating these techniques in a combat medic training. General Harrison acknowledged their enthusiasm while maintaining focus on broader institutional implications. This tactical innovation will be evaluated by Helicopter Training Command for integration into pilot education curricula throughout military aviation. Major Chin highlighted operational advantages that extended beyond single mission applications. Sir, terrain analysis shows multiple forward operating bases where conventional helicopter operations are impossible, but sideways landing approaches could provide critical logistical support. Staff Sergeant Morris provided communication perspective on coordination effectiveness. General, ground unit confidence in air support increases significantly when pilots can adapt to tactical requirements rather than being limited by standard procedures. Lieutenant Park presented strategic intelligence assessment, showing enemy adaptation to innovative military tactics. Sir, hostile forces are requesting guidance for countering unconventional helicopter operations, confirming our tactical advantage. General Harrison studied mission documentation that would become foundation for new operational doctrine. Captain Rodriguez, your tactical analysis and execution demonstrate military aviation advancement that deserves formal recognition beyond mission success. Rodriguez sensed the magnitude of institutional change her unconventional approach had initiated. Individual innovation was translating into systematic capability that would benefit countless future operations. The general moved to official documentation procedures. Captain Rodriguez will receive commendation for tactical innovation under combat conditions. Her sideways landing technique will be designated as approved emergency procedure for terrain-constrained extraction operations. Torres provided additional technical assessment of aircraft performance during unconventional operations. Sir, the Apache's capabilities are enhanced when tactical flexibility allows optimization of engagement angles and operational effectiveness. Martinez validated medical advantages through innovative evacuation methods. General, casualty survival rates demonstrate clear improvement when aircraft operations adapt to mission requirements rather than procedural limitations. Major Chun supported broader tactical implications for military aviation development. Sir, the sideways landing approach provides capabilities that conventional training doctrine does not address, but combat effectiveness clearly requires. Staff Sergeant Morris added operational coordination perspective. General, communication effectiveness between air and ground units improved when helicopter operations could respond to tactical requirements with adaptive capability. Lieutenant Park concluded with strategic assessment of innovative tactical advantages. Sir, enemy forces are adapting their defensive planning specifically to counter our unconventional helicopter operations, confirming persistent military value. General Harrison processed institutional implications while recognizing exceptional military achievement under combat pressure. Captain Rodriguez, your tactical innovation represents advancement in helicopter operations that will benefit military effectiveness for years to come. The briefing room atmosphere reflected complete transformation from initial skepticism to institutional validation of unconventional approaches when properly planned and expertly executed. Rodriguez felt satisfaction as General Harrison's formal recognition established precedent for tactical flexibility in military aviation operations. The proving moment had succeeded beyond personal vindication towards systematic improvement. Furthermore, General Harrison announced, Captain Rodriguez will be assigned to Tactical Development Command to establish training protocols for unconventional helicopter operations throughout military aviation units. Major Chin expressed support for expanded tactical development programs. Sir, pilot training curricula should incorporate unconventional approaches for terrain conditions that make conventional operations impossible. Torres volunteered for advanced tactical training under Rodriguez's instruction. General, weapons effectiveness during unconventional operations exceeded conventional engagement parameters and deserves broader application. Martinez recommended integration of innovative techniques into combat medical training. Sir, evacuation capabilities can be enhanced through aircraft operations that prioritize mission requirements over procedural constraints. Staff Sergeant Morris supported communication coordination improvements through tactical flexibility. General, ground unit effectiveness increases when air support can adapt to battlefield requirements rather than predetermined limitations. Lieutenant Park provided strategic intelligence, confirming persistent advantages of tactical innovation. Sir, enemy adaptation efforts validate the military value of unconventional helicopter operations under appropriate circumstances. General Harrison concluded with institutional commitment to tactical advancement. Captain Rodriguez has demonstrated that calculated innovation can provide mission success where established doctrine fails. This achievement deserves recognition and systematic development. The transformation was complete. Tactical innovation had overcome institutional resistance through demonstrated effectiveness under combat conditions that demanded adaptation beyond conventional procedures and thinking. 3 weeks later, Captain Rodriguez stood before a packed auditorium at the Military Aviation Training Command, facing 200 pilots who had gathered to learn the sideways landing technique that had saved Bravo 7. The same maneuver General Harrison had once dismissed as circus showboating was now official doctrine. The transformation in institutional attitude was remarkable. Major Chun sat in the front row, having volunteered to assist with tactical development programs. Staff Sergeant Morris operated communication equipment for the training demonstration. Lieutenant Park provided intelligence analysis on enemy countermeasures. Ladies and gentlemen, Rodriguez began, addressing the assembled pilots. The sideways landing approach represents tactical adaptation to terrain conditions that make conventional helicopter operations impossible. Success requires precise planning and expert execution. She activated the presentation system, displaying satellite imagery of terrain similar to where Bravo 7 had been trapped. Enemy forces consistently positioned defensive assets, assuming conventional flight profiles. Unconventional approaches exploit predictable weaknesses in hostile defensive planning. Torres, now assigned as assistant instructor, provided weapons effectiveness perspective. The sideways approach creates engagement angles that enemy forces cannot counter effectively. Suppressive fire accuracy improves because hostile positions are optimized against standard attack vectors. Martinez presented medical evacuation advantages during the training session. Casualty survival rates increase dramatically when aircraft operations can access previously impossible rescue scenarios. Time reduction in evacuation procedures can mean the difference between life and death. General Harrison entered the auditorium and took a position at the rear, his presence commanding immediate attention from training participants. His transformation from skeptic to supporter represented institutional validation of tactical innovation. The general approached the podium as Rodriguez concluded technical instruction. Captain Rodriguez has demonstrated that military effectiveness requires adaptation to changing tactical environments. Her innovation represents advancement in helicopter operations. Pilot training must incorporate unconventional approaches when combat effectiveness demands solutions beyond established procedures. General Harrison continued. Tactical flexibility provides mission success where rigid adherence to doctrine guarantees failure. Rodriguez felt profound satisfaction as General Harrison's public endorsement validated tactical innovation before the entire military aviation community. The proving moment had expanded beyond personal vindication towards systematic improvement. The training session continued with practical demonstrations of aircraft performance during unconventional operations. Pilots practiced rotation techniques and clearance calculations that enabled sideways landing approaches under controlled conditions. Torres instructed weapons coordination during unconventional flight profiles. Suppressive fire effectiveness requires adaptation to non-standard engagement angles. Enemy defensive positions become vulnerabilities when aircraft operations exploit their assumptions. Martinez provided medical considerations for evacuation operations in confined spaces. Casualty care procedures must adapt to aircraft orientation and spatial constraints during sideways landing operations. Coordination between flight crew and medical personnel becomes critical. Major Chun highlighted tactical planning requirements for unconventional helicopter operations. Mission success depends on accurate terrain analysis and enemy position assessment. Standard procedures provide baseline, but tactical innovation addresses specific operational requirements. Staff Sergeant Morris presented communication coordination during complex extraction operations. Ground unit effectiveness increases when air support can respond to battlefield requirements with adaptive capability rather than predetermined limitations. Lieutenant Park concluded with strategic intelligence assessment of enemy adaptation efforts. Hostile forces are developing countermeasures for unconventional helicopter operations, confirming persistent military value of tactical innovation. General Harrison provided closing remarks that established institutional commitment to tactical advancement. Military aviation must balance proven effectiveness with adaptive capability for changing combat environments. Captain Rodriguez has demonstrated the value of calculated innovation. The auditorium erupted in applause as training participants recognized the significance of tactical development that expanded operational capabilities beyond conventional limitations. Rodriguez felt the weight of responsibility that came with institutional recognition. Individual achievement had translated into systematic capability that would benefit countless future operations and potentially save numerous lives. After the training session, General Harrison approached Rodriguez privately. Captain, your tactical innovation has created advancement in military aviation that extends far beyond single-mission success. This achievement represents exceptional military leadership. Have you ever had to prove that your unconventional approach was right when everyone else thought it was impossible? Rodriguez's journey from skepticism to institutional validation demonstrates that calculated innovation can overcome resistance when expertise meets opportunity. What did you think of Captain Rodriguez's incredible maneuver and the transformation in General Harrison's attitude? Sometimes the most effective solutions require thinking beyond established procedures to meet tactical requirements that conventional approaches cannot address. The sideways landing technique had evolved from rejected proposal to approved doctrine, proving that military effectiveness sometimes requires challenging institutional assumptions through demonstrated competence under combat conditions. Rodriguez looked out at the training participants preparing for advanced tactical instruction. Her unconventional approach had become the foundation for enhanced operational capabilities that would serve military aviation for years to come. The proving moment was complete, but its implications would continue expanding as tactical innovation translated into systematic advancement in military helicopter operations throughout the aviation community.